The massive flagship Sovereign's Wrath moved through the dark space like a metal mountain floating among the stars. Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge, looking at the holographic display that showed his fleet of 50,000 warships. Each ship was bigger than most space stations and carried enough firepower to destroy entire moons. The Valdorian Empire had built this armada over 300 years, and no enemy had ever survived facing even a small part of it. Kethvar had gray skin that looked like old stone, and 4 arms that moved with practiced military precision. His red eyes glowed as he read the orders that had come directly from Emperor Zalthon himself. The message was simple and clear. The Empire wanted a small blue planet called Earth, and Kethvar was to take it by any means necessary. The intelligence reports about Earth made Kethvar laugh. The humans who lived there had barely learned to travel between planets in their own solar system. They still used chemical rockets that moved slower than a Valdorian cargo ship. Their weapons were primitive nuclear devices that could barely scratch the hull of the smallest Imperial vessel. The humans had no shields, no energy weapons, and no real space navy to speak of. What made the mission even easier was that Earth seemed to have no unified government. The planet was divided into hundreds of small nations that spent most of their time fighting each other instead of working together. The Imperial scouts had watched human conflicts for decades and saw nothing but chaos and primitive warfare. These humans used metal projectiles and explosive chemicals, while the Empire had mastered energy manipulation and gravitational control. Kethvar walked to the communication station where his aide waited with more reports. The aide was a young Valdorian officer named Vexmar who had never seen real combat. His enthusiasm reminded Kethvar of his own early days in the Imperial Navy, when conquering worlds seemed like a glorious adventure. The reports showed that Earth had some basic space technology, but nothing that could threaten even a single Imperial ship. The humans had built a few space stations and sent some small probes to nearby planets, but their achievements were laughable compared to Valdorian engineering. The Empire had conquered star systems with technology 1,000 times more advanced than what Earth possessed. What puzzled Kethvar slightly was that Earth seemed to have very little military presence in space. Most human nations kept their armies on the planet's surface and had only a few orbital defense platforms. For a species that had achieved interplanetary travel, they seemed remarkably unprepared for threats from outside their solar system. Perhaps they simply had no imagination about what dangers existed among the stars. The Emperor's orders mentioned that Earth had valuable resources and a strategic location that would help the Empire expand into new regions of the galaxy. The planet had large amounts of water, rare metals, and organic compounds that the Empire could use. More importantly, Earth sat at the edge of a spiral arm that connected to several unexplored sectors where other primitive species might exist. Kethvar had read about human psychology in the Imperial databases. Humans were described as emotional, unpredictable, and prone to panic when faced with superior force. The report suggested that a show of overwhelming power would make most human governments surrender immediately. A few orbital bombardments of empty areas would demonstrate Imperial strength and convince the humans to submit without requiring the destruction of valuable infrastructure. The Admiral had conquered 47 worlds during his long career, and humans seemed far easier than most species he had faced. The Korthak had fought with savage determination until their last city fell. The Zalani had used advanced technology and clever tactics that had cost the Empire thousands of ships. The crystal beings of Nexus Prime had required special weapons to defeat because normal energy attacks passed right through them. But humans appeared to have none of these advantages. They were soft, short-lived creatures who had spent most of their existence fighting primitive wars on a single planet. Their technology was centuries behind Imperial standards, and their military thinking was limited by their lack of experience with real space warfare. As the fleet moved closer to Earth's solar system, Kethvar reviewed the invasion plans one more time. The first wave would establish orbital control and destroy any human space assets. The second wave would target major population centers and government facilities to break human resistance. The third wave would land ground forces to secure important resources and establish Imperial control. The whole operation was expected to take less than 1 day. Human weapons could not penetrate Imperial shields, and human ships were too slow to escape or fight effectively. The few orbital platforms Earth possessed could be destroyed by long-range bombardment before they could even detect the Imperial fleet approaching. Meanwhile, far below on the surface of Earth, Dr. Hyun-Woo Park sat in his office at the Global Defense Initiative headquarters. The building looked like an ordinary research facility, but contained some of the most advanced technology that humanity had ever developed. Hyun-Woo was looking at screens that showed the approaching Valdorian fleet while drinking a cup of coffee that had already grown cold. The detection systems that tracked the alien ships were hidden throughout the solar system and used principles of physics that most humans did not even know existed. The screens showed not just the location and size of each enemy vessel, but also detailed information about their weapons, shields, and crew composition. Humanity had been watching the Valdorian Empire for much longer than the Empire had been watching Earth. General So-Jin Kim entered the office without knocking. She was a small woman with gray hair and calm eyes who had spent her entire career preparing for this exact moment. So-Jin had trained with weapons and strategies that no human military academy taught because most people were not ready to learn about humanity's real capabilities. So-Jin looked at the displays showing the massive alien fleet and nodded slightly. She had expected something like this would happen eventually. The universe was full of aggressive species that believed strength came from conquest and domination. Most of them never learned there were other kinds of power until it was too late. Hyun-Woo turned to face So-Jin, and they exchanged a look that contained years of shared understanding. Both of them had dedicated their lives to protecting Earth from threats that most humans could not imagine. They had worked with technologies that seemed like magic and prepared defenses that could reshape reality itself. So Jin activated her communication device and sent a coded message to defense coordinators around the world. Within minutes, President Dong-hyuk Chen was connected from his secure bunker along with Admiral Yuri Lim, who commanded the Pacific Defense Fleet. Other leaders joined the conversation from hidden facilities that did not appear on any public maps. The leaders listened as Hyun-Woo explained what the approaching fleet represented and what the aliens probably expected to find when they reached Earth. The Valdorians had made the same mistake that many aggressive species made when they encountered humanity. They had looked at human civilization and seen only the surface layer that was visible to casual observation. What the aliens could not see was that humanity had spent the last 50 years developing technology in secret while appearing to remain primitive and divided. The chaotic appearance of human politics hid a deep coordination between groups that worked to protect Earth from exactly this kind of threat. The apparent lack of advanced weapons concealed defensive systems that could eliminate threats without leaving any trace of how it was done. So Jin looked around at the faces on the communication screens and saw the same calm determination that she felt herself. These people had trained for decades to face this moment, and they were ready. The aliens expected to find a helpless primitive world, but they would discover something very different. Hyun-Woo spoke quietly to the assembled leaders, and his words were simple and clear. It was time to activate Protocol Omega and show the galaxy why humanity had chosen to remain hidden while developing the power to protect itself. The approaching fleet represented exactly the kind of threat that Protocol Omega had been designed to handle. So Jin ended the communication and turned back to the displays showing the alien ships. In a few hours, those ships would enter the outer edge of the solar system and begin their attack. By the time the sun set, the universe would understand that humanity was not as helpless as it appeared to be. The Valdorian fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system, with a display of power that had terrified countless worlds before this one. 50,000 warships materialized in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with energy shields that could deflect planet-killing weapons. Each ship was a masterpiece of Imperial engineering, built to inspire fear and demonstrate the absolute superiority of Valdorian civilization. Admiral Kethvar stood on his bridge watching the tactical displays as they mapped the primitive solar system ahead. The third planet from the star showed the blue and white colors that indicated a living world, just as the intelligence reports had described. Long-range sensors detected the electromagnetic signatures of a technological civilization, but nothing that registered as a serious military threat. The sensors found exactly what Kethvar had expected to see. A few dozen small space stations orbited the planet Earth, along with hundreds of tiny satellites that seemed designed for communication and observation rather than warfare. Several primitive spacecraft moved slowly between Earth and its single moon, using chemical propulsion systems that the Empire had abandoned thousands of years ago. What amused Kethvar most was the handful of human ships that had positioned themselves between his fleet and Earth. The largest of these vessels was barely the size of a Valdorian shuttle, and their energy signatures suggested they were powered by fusion reactors that produced less energy than a single Imperial weapon capacitor. These ships had apparently been sent to intercept his armada of 50,000 battle-tested warships. The communication officer reported that one of the human vessels was transmitting a message on standard galactic frequencies. This surprised Kethvar because the intelligence reports had suggested that humans were not even aware that such communication protocols existed. Perhaps they had learned about galactic standard communications from wreckage of Imperial scout ships. Kethvar decided to accept the communication mostly for his own entertainment. He wanted to hear what these primitive creatures thought they could say to the commander of the most powerful military force in the galaxy. The main display activated and showed the bridge of the human ship that had sent the message. The human commander was smaller than Kethvar had expected, with black hair and dark eyes that showed no sign of the terror that most species displayed when facing Imperial power. This human wore a simple uniform without the elaborate decorations that usually marked military leaders among primitive civilizations. Behind him, other humans worked at control stations with the same calm efficiency that Kethvar recognized from experienced military crews. The human spoke in clear galactic standard with only a slight accent that suggested his species had not been using the language for very long. His words were polite and respectful, but carried an undertone that Kethvar found oddly confident for someone facing impossible odds. Captain Min-Ho Choi of the Earth vessel, Soul's Pride, introduced himself and requested that the Valdorian fleet leave human space peacefully. He explained that Earth had no quarrel with the Valdorian Empire and hoped that any misunderstanding could be resolved through diplomatic discussion rather than military action. The request was so absurd that Kethvar began laughing before Min-Ho had finished speaking. The idea that 50 primitive ships could make demands of an Imperial fleet was beyond ridiculous. Several officers on the bridge joined their admiral in expressing amusement at human arrogance. Kethvar decided to share this entertainment with his entire fleet by broadcasting the human communication to all ships. Within moments, hundreds of thousands of Valdorian warriors were listening to the tiny human captain who seemed to believe he had any chance of affecting Imperial decisions. The laughter that echoed through the fleet communication channels would have been audible from space if sound could travel in vacuum. Seasoned veterans who had fought in the War of Seven Suns and the Korthak Rebellion found themselves amazed by human audacity. Some officers began placing bets on how long the human ships would survive once the attack began. Kethvar composed himself enough to respond to the human captain with the mixture of condescension and threat that had proven effective against other primitive species. He explained that Earth had been claimed by the Valdorian Empire under the ancient rite of conquest and that resistance would only lead to unnecessary destruction. The admiral offered the humans a choice that he considered generous under the circumstances. They could surrender immediately and be allowed to continue existing as servants of the Empire, or they could resist and be completely destroyed along with their entire civilization. He gave them exactly 10 minutes to make their decision and transmit their surrender. Min-Ho listened to this ultimatum with the same calm expression he had maintained throughout the conversation. Behind him, his crew continued working at their stations without any sign of panic or desperation. One officer, a young woman with short hair, looked up from her console and spoke quietly to her captain. Lieutenant Yoonji Seo asked if they should tell the aliens about the mines. Her voice carried the tone of someone asking about a minor technical detail rather than a desperate military situation. The question was clearly audible through the open communication channel and reached every ship in the Valdorian fleet. Kethvar felt a moment of confusion as he processed what the human officer had said. What mines could she possibly be referring to? The Imperial sensors had detected no human military installations anywhere in the solar system beyond the primitive orbital platforms around Earth itself. The Admiral's confusion deepened when Min-Ho smiled and responded to his tactical officer as if they were discussing routine ship operations rather than facing the most powerful military force in galactic history. The human captain confirmed that they should indeed tell the aliens about the mines. Minho turned back to address Kethvar directly, and his smile became broader as he spoke. He thanked the admiral for the generous offer, but explained that humanity would have to decline the opportunity to become servants of the Valdorian Empire. Then he mentioned something that made no sense to anyone listening. The human captain calmly informed Kethvar that his fleet was currently surrounded by 2.7 million gravitational collapse mines that had been placed throughout their formation during the past 3 hours. He said this as casually as someone might comment on the weather, without any trace of bluffing or desperation. Kethvar stared at the display screen, trying to understand what the human meant. No ships had approached the Imperial fleet since their arrival in the solar system. The most advanced human vessels were still millions of kilometers away and moving far too slowly to have reached Imperial positions. The sensors showed empty space around every Valdorian ship. The admiral quickly checked, with his sensor operators to confirm that no mines or other devices had been detected anywhere near the fleet. The reports came back exactly as expected. Space around the Imperial formation was completely empty except for the normal cosmic dust and radiation that existed everywhere in the galaxy. Kethvar decided that the human captain was either insane or attempting some kind of primitive psychological warfare. Perhaps human desperation had driven their leader to make impossible claims in hopes of causing confusion or delay. The admiral had seen similar tactics from other doomed species. The communication officer reported that several other human ships were now transmitting similar messages about mines and gravitational collapse devices. The humans seemed to believe they could convince the Imperial fleet to retreat by making ridiculous claims about weapons that clearly did not exist. Kethvar was about to end the communication and begin the bombardment when Yunji spoke again from her position at the tactical station. She looked at her captain and asked a simple question that somehow made the admiral feel uneasy, despite its obvious impossibility. The young human officer wanted to know if she should activate the mines now. She asked this while looking directly at readings on her console that seemed to show detailed information about every ship in the Valdorian fleet. Her finger hovered over a single button that appeared no different from hundreds of other controls on the human bridge. Minho nodded to his tactical officer and told her to proceed with activation. He spoke to Kethvar one last time, explaining that the admiral had been given a fair chance to leave peacefully, but had chosen war instead. The human captain expressed genuine regret that diplomatic solutions had failed. Eunji pressed the button. For a moment, nothing happened. The Imperial sensors continued showing empty space around the fleet, and no energy signatures that indicated any kind of weapon activation. Kethvar felt relief that his assessment had been correct, and the humans were indeed bluffing about capabilities they did not possess. Then space itself began to change around every ship in the Valdorian fleet. Points of absolute darkness appeared throughout the formation, each no larger than a grain of sand but containing gravitational forces that bent light and warped reality. The Imperial sensors finally detected something, but their readings made no sense to anyone who saw them. The darkness spread and grew as gravitational collapse began at thousands of points simultaneously. The empty space where the Valdorian fleet had existed moments before contained nothing but fading traces of Hawking radiation and the shocked silence of human crews who had just witnessed the complete annihilation of 50,000 enemy warships. The gravitational collapse mines had performed exactly as designed, creating localized black holes that consumed everything within their influence before evaporating harmlessly into quantum foam. Captain Minho Choi stood on the Bridge of Souls. Pride looking at the tactical display that showed only empty coordinates where moments before the most powerful military force in the galaxy had threatened his world. The process had taken exactly 4.7 seconds from activation to completion, faster than most organic minds could properly comprehend what was happening. Lieutenant Yunji Seo turned from her tactical station and reported that all gravitational signatures had returned to normal background levels. The mines had functioned perfectly, leaving no residual effects that could endanger Earth or any other objects in the solar system. The technology was precise enough to eliminate specific targets while leaving everything else completely untouched. The communication systems aboard Soul's Pride immediately connected to the Global Defense Initiative headquarters, where General Sojin Kim and Dr. Hyun Woo Park were monitoring the situation. Both leaders had watched the destruction through real-time sensor feeds and confirmed that Phase 1 of Protocol Omega had achieved complete success. Hyunwoo activated his communication array to contact other members of the Defense Coordination team around Earth. Within moments, screens throughout the command center showed the faces of scientists and military officers who had spent decades preparing for exactly this type of alien threat. Their expressions showed satisfaction but no surprise at the outcome of the engagement. Dr. Jae-won appeared on one screen from his laboratory deep beneath the Himalayan mountains where humanity's most advanced physics research took place. His facility contained dimensional fold generators that could manipulate space-time itself and relocate entire star systems to pocket dimensions outside normal reality. The technology required to build such devices represented scientific achievements that most galactic civilizations never imagined possible. Commander Haiwan Kang joined the communication from her station aboard the orbital platform hidden behind Earth's moon. Her facility coordinated the quantum tunneling networks that had delivered the gravitational mines to their targets without any human ship needing to approach the enemy fleet. The mines had been transmitted directly through folded spacetime and materialized in predetermined positions throughout the Valdorian formation. Sojin looked at the assembled team and confirmed that Phase 1 had eliminated the immediate threat, but intelligence suggested that larger forces would likely follow. The Valdorian Empire would not accept the total destruction of their most powerful fleet without investigating what had happened and probably attempting revenge with even greater military resources. Hyunwoo accessed the galactic communication networks that humanity had been monitoring secretly for decades. The automated probe ships that had witnessed the fleet's destruction were already transmitting their sensor data back to Valdorian space at faster than light speeds. Within hours, the Empire would know that their most elite forces had been completely eliminated by what they had expected to be a primitive and helpless world. The probe data would show the impossible reality of what had occurred but would provide no explanation for how humans had achieved such devastating technological superiority. The gravitational collapse mines used principles of physics that the Valdorian Empire had never encountered, created through scientific breakthroughs that humanity had kept completely hidden from galactic observation. Jae-won reported that his team had already begun preparations for Phase 2 of Protocol Omega. The dimensional fold generators were calibrated and ready to relocate entire enemy fleets or even star systems if necessary. The targeting computers contained precise coordinates for every major Valdorian military installation and could execute dimensional transfers faster than any enemy could respond to the threat. Haiwan confirmed that the Stellar Engineering Division was also prepared for expanded operations. Humanity possessed the ability to manipulate gravity on stellar scales, potentially moving entire star systems or altering the fundamental properties of space-time itself. These capabilities had been developed in absolute secrecy over the past 50 years, while Earth appeared to remain primitive and divided to outside observers. The truth that no alien civilization suspected was that humanity had unified in secret, decades ago when early space exploration detected signs of aggressive galactic empires. Rather than announcing their unity and technological development, human leaders had chosen to appear weak and chaotic while building defenses that could protect Earth from any conceivable threat. The apparent divisions between human nations were carefully maintained illusions designed to make potential invaders underestimate Earth's capabilities. While aliens observed primitive conflicts and technological limitations, the real human civilization was developing sciences that bordered on what other species might consider magic or divine power. Sojin activated additional communication channels to contact other divisions of the Global Defense Initiative that most humans did not know existed. Captain Tae-young-sung appeared on screen from the Temporal Warfare Division, where scientists had mastered limited forms of time manipulation that could accelerate defensive reactions or slow enemy weapons to harmlessness. Professor Ji-hoon Bae joined from the Galactic Monitoring Station, where teams tracked every major military movement throughout the local spiral arm. His sensors could detect fleet movements from thousands of light-years away and had been observing Valdorian expansion for generations, carefully studying their tactics and technology to develop appropriate countermeasures. The assembled team began reviewing contingency plans for larger alien invasions while monitoring galactic communications for signs of enemy response. Humanity had prepared for every scenario from small exploration fleets to galaxy-spanning armadas, developing countermeasures that could handle threats of any conceivable magnitude. What made human defensive technology so effective was not just its power, but its fundamental approach to warfare. Instead of building bigger weapons to destroy larger enemies, humanity had developed ways to neutralize threats without causing unnecessary destruction. The gravitational mines eliminated enemy ships completely, but left no dangerous residue or collateral damage. This philosophy extended to all human military technology. The dimensional fold generators could relocate enemy fleets to empty regions of space, where they could survive but no longer threaten anyone. The stellar engineering systems could move entire civilizations to better worlds rather than destroying them. Temporal warfare could slow enemy attacks to harmlessness without killing the attackers. Hyunwoo explained to the team that this approach reflected fundamental differences between human thinking and the mentality of most aggressive galactic species. While other civilizations focused on conquest and domination, humanity had learned from its own violent history that true security came from wisdom rather than raw power. The decades of apparent division and conflict on Earth had actually been humanity's way of learning every possible lesson about war, violence, and the costs of aggression. By experiencing and ultimately rejecting these approaches, human civilization had developed beyond the cycle of conquest that trapped most galactic empires in endless cycles of expansion and conflict. Sojin looked at the tactical displays showing empty space where the Valdorian fleet had been and reflected on the choices that had led to this moment. Humanity could have announced its technological achievements and joined the galactic community as another aggressive empire seeking territory and resources. Instead, they had chosen to remain hidden while developing the power to protect not just Earth, but potentially any world threatened by conquest. The general knew that word of Earth's defensive capabilities would soon spread throughout the galaxy. Other aggressive empires would learn that humanity possessed technology beyond their understanding and might choose to avoid Earth entirely. Some might even reconsider their own approaches to expansion and conquest when faced with proof that alternatives existed. Professor Jihoon reported that his monitoring stations were already detecting increased communication activity throughout Valdorian space as news of the fleet's destruction reached their leadership. Emergency conferences were being held at the highest levels of Imperial government, as military commanders tried to understand what had happened to their most powerful forces. Haiwan confirmed that long-range sensors showed no immediate signs of additional fleet movements toward Earth, but intelligence suggested that the Empire would likely respond with overwhelming force once they processed the implications of what they had witnessed. The complete destruction of their elite armada would be seen as an act of war that demanded massive retaliation. Sojin nodded and authorized the team to begin preparations for Phase 2 operations. If the Valdorian Empire chose to escalate the conflict rather than accepting the lesson they had been taught, the emergency session of the Valdorian Imperial Council convened within hours of receiving the probe data from Earth's solar system. Emperor Zalthon sat on his crystal throne while holographic displays showed the impossible recordings of his most powerful fleet being completely destroyed in less than 5 seconds. The throne room that had witnessed the planning of countless successful conquests now hosted discussions of the Empire's first total military defeat. The probe recordings played again and again as Imperial scientists tried to understand what they were seeing. 50,000 warships that had conquered entire star systems simply vanished into points of darkness that consumed everything around them before disappearing entirely. The gravitational readings suggested technology that violated several fundamental laws of physics as the Empire understood them. Chief Science Minister Vex Tell stood before the throne presenting his analysis of the sensor data with increasing confusion and frustration. The humans had somehow created localized gravitational singularities throughout the Imperial fleet without any detectable means of delivery. No human ships had approached close enough to plant such devices, and no energy signatures had indicated weapon deployment. Emperor Zalthon listened to the scientific explanations with growing rage that mixed disbelief with humiliation. The species he had dismissed as primitive insects had eliminated his elite forces using technology that surpassed anything in Imperial databases. The empire that had dominated the galaxy for thousands of years had been made to look helpless by creatures they had planned to enslave. The Emperor's four arms gestured angrily as he demanded explanations from military commanders who had no answers to give. Admiral Thakran, veteran of the War of Seven Suns and commander of the Second Fleet, studied the probe data with the grim expression of someone who recognized superior technology when he saw it. Thakran had fought against the crystal beings of Nexus Prime, the energy creatures of the Andromeda Collective, and the machine intelligences of the Outer Rim. He understood warfare against exotic opponents who used unfamiliar technologies and tactics. But the complete annihilation of Admiral Kethvar's fleet suggested capabilities beyond anything he had encountered in 3 centuries of military service. The recordings showed no trace of the gravitational weapons until the moment they activated. The human ships had remained millions of kilometers away from Imperial positions and showed no energy signatures consistent with advanced weapon systems. Yet somehow, they had placed millions of precise gravitational devices throughout a fleet formation in empty space without any detectable method of delivery. Vextal explained that the gravitational collapse technology required scientific understanding that the Empire had never achieved. Creating stable microsingularities demanded mastery of physics that Imperial research had barely begun to explore. The precision required to place such devices without detection suggested technological capabilities centuries beyond current Imperial standards. What disturbed the Imperial leadership even more than the advanced technology was the casual manner in which the humans had used it. The probe recording showed human officers discussing the complete destruction of 50,000 ships as if they were planning routine maintenance operations. There had been no sign of desperation, fear, or even significant effort in eliminating the most powerful military force in galactic history. Emperor Zalthon rose from his throne and began pacing the length of the chamber while his advisors waited in tense silence. The Empire had built its power on the principle that superior technology and overwhelming force could conquer any opponent. The idea that some primitive world possessed defensive capabilities that made Imperial fleets irrelevant challenged the fundamental assumptions of Valdorian civilization. The Emperor stopped pacing and turned to address Admiral Thakran directly. The Empire could not allow this defeat to stand without response. If word spread that humans had destroyed an Imperial fleet without suffering any losses, other subject worlds might begin to question Valdorian supremacy. The psychological impact of this defeat could destabilize Imperial control throughout the galaxy. Thakran understood the political necessity of a massive response, but questioned whether conventional tactics could succeed against opponents who possessed such advanced defensive technology. The Admiral suggested that the Empire needed to understand human capabilities better before committing additional forces that might be destroyed as easily as Kethvar's fleet. The suggestion enraged Zalthon beyond the point of rational consideration. The Emperor declared that the Empire would respond with overwhelming force that no defensive technology could possibly handle. He ordered the mobilization of the entire Imperial Navy, over 800,000 ships including the legendary planet killers that could destroy entire star systems. The planet killers were massive vessels designed to crack worlds apart when other conquest methods proved insufficient. They had been used only 3 times in Imperial history, and their deployment was considered the ultimate expression of Valdorian power. No world had ever survived facing even a single planet killer, and Zalthon was prepared to send dozens of them against Earth. Admiral Thakran accepted his orders while privately questioning whether raw firepower would prove effective against opponents who could manipulate space-time itself. The gravitational weapons suggested scientific mastery that might extend to other exotic technologies capable of neutralizing even planet-killer-class vessels, but Imperial pride demanded a response that would restore the Empire's reputation for invincibility. The mobilization orders went out immediately to every Imperial fleet throughout the galaxy. Military commanders received instructions to abandon all current operations and converge on staging areas near Earth's solar system. The largest military force in galactic history would gather to ensure that humanity learned the consequences of defying Imperial will. While the Valdorian Empire prepared for massive retaliation, monitoring stations throughout Earth detected the increased military communications and fleet movements. Professor Ji-Hoon Bai sat in his underground facility watching as thousands of enemy ships began moving toward human space from dozens of star systems. The communications intercepts revealed the Empire's intentions clearly. Emperor Zalthon planned to overwhelm Earth's defenses through sheer numbers and firepower that no technology could possibly counter. The Imperial leadership believed that whatever exotic weapons humans possessed must have limitations that massive fleet deployment could overcome. Ji-hoon transmitted his findings to General So-jin Kim and the other defense coordinators, who received the intelligence with the same calm professionalism they had shown during the first alien attack. The prospect of facing 800,000 enemy ships caused no panic or desperation among the human leadership who had prepared for exactly this type of escalation. So-jin convened another meeting of the Global Defense Initiative leadership to discuss Phase 2 response options. Dr. Hyun-woo Park joined from his laboratory along with the other scientists and military commanders who had overseen the destruction of the first Valdorian fleet. Their expressions showed determination, mixed with slight disappointment, that diplomatic solutions had failed. Dr. Jae-won-yoon reported that the dimensional fold generators were operating at full capacity and could handle fleet relocations of any conceivable size. The technology could transfer entire star systems to pocket dimensions outside normal space-time, where they would remain safely isolated but unable to threaten anyone else. The process was completely reversible if the relocated civilizations demonstrated wisdom and peaceful intentions. Commander Haiwan Kang confirmed that the Stellar Engineering Division had identified optimal relocation sites for large-scale dimensional transfers. Several empty regions of space contained everything necessary for aggressive civilizations to build peaceful societies while being too distant from inhabited worlds to pose future threats. Captain Tae-young-sung reported that the Temporal Warfare Division was prepared to implement time differential fields that could slow enemy fleets to relative motionlessness, while acceleration fields gave human defenses unlimited reaction time. The technology could make the largest enemy armada completely harmless without causing any permanent damage to ships or crews. So-jin listened to the reports and reflected on humanity's philosophical approach to dealing with aggressive aliens. The gravitational mines had eliminated the First Fleet completely because immediate decisive action was necessary to prevent orbital bombardment of Earth. But the larger Imperial response provided opportunities for more sophisticated solutions that might avoid unnecessary destruction. Hyun-woo suggested that humanity's response to the massive fleet should demonstrate not just superior technology, but superior wisdom in its application. Rather than simply destroying 800,000 ships and millions of alien lives, Earth could show the galaxy that true power lay in the ability to choose mercy over vengeance and creative solutions over simple destruction. The team began planning an operation that would neutralize the Imperial threat while offering the Valdorian Empire a chance to reconsider its approach to galactic relations. The massive Imperial Navy arrived at Earth's solar system 3 days later in a display of force that dwarfed anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. 800,000 warships materialized from hyperspace in perfect formation, their combined, mass-creating gravitational distortions that affected the orbits of outer planets. Among them floated the dreaded planet killers, vessels so large they appeared like artificial moons bristling with weapons capable of shattering worlds. Admiral Thokron commanded this unprecedented armada from his flagship Eternal Dominion, a vessel that had served as his headquarters during the conquest of 17 star systems. The Admiral studied tactical displays showing the same small group of human ships that had somehow destroyed the previous Imperial fleet, still maintaining their defensive positions despite facing overwhelming odds. The sensor readings made no more sense than they had during the first encounter. Human technology still appeared primitive, and their ships showed no energy signatures consistent with the exotic weapons that had annihilated 50,000 Imperial vessels. Yet Thokron had not survived 3 centuries of warfare by underestimating opponents who had already proven their capabilities. Captain Min-ho Choi stood on the bridge of Seoul's Pride, watching the massive enemy formation through displays that showed detailed analysis of every Imperial ship. The human sensors identified weapon configurations, shield frequencies, and crew complements with precision that would have shocked the aliens if they had known such detailed intelligence was possible. Lieutenant Yoon-ji Seo reported that all defensive systems remained at full readiness while monitoring stations throughout the solar system tracked every enemy vessel. The gravitational mine networks had been reconfigured for deployment against much larger targets, though the defense coordinators hoped that alternative solutions might prove unnecessary. Admiral Thokron opened communication channels to address the human fleet directly. His message was broadcast throughout the solar system and transmitted to Earth itself, so that the entire human population would understand the consequences of their defiance. The Admiral's words carried the weight of Imperial authority backed by the largest military force in galactic history. Thokran demanded immediate and unconditional surrender from all human forces and government authorities. He explained that the Empire had brought sufficient firepower to reduce Earth to cosmic dust and would not hesitate to use planet-killer weapons if humans continued their resistance. The Admiral offered one final chance for survival through complete submission to Imperial authority. Minho listened to the ultimatum with the same calm expression he had maintained during previous alien threats. Behind him, his crew continued working at their stations with the quiet efficiency of people who understood exactly what they were facing and felt confident in their ability to handle it. The human captain activated his communication system and responded to Admiral Thokran with words that surprised the alien commander. Instead of defiance or desperate bargaining, Minho expressed genuine regret that the Empire had chosen to escalate the conflict rather than accepting the lesson they had been offered through the destruction of their first fleet. Minho explained that humanity had hoped the demonstration of superior defensive technology would convince the Valdorian Empire to reconsider their approach to galactic relations. The humans had no desire for conquest or domination, but would defend themselves and other peaceful worlds against aggressive expansion by any means necessary. The captain turned to his tactical officer and asked if the Universal Reset Protocol was ready for implementation. Yunji confirmed that all systems were operational and targeting data had been verified for the entire Imperial fleet. She awaited final authorization to proceed with Phase 2 of humanity's defensive response. Admiral Thokran felt the same confusion that had affected his predecessor when humans made references to capabilities that seemed impossible. The Imperial sensors detected no evidence of weapons or devices that could threaten even a single ship in his massive armada. Yet the casual confidence in human voices suggested they believed they could handle a force 800 times larger than what they had faced before. Minho spoke directly to Thokran one final time, explaining that the Admiral was about to witness why humanity had spent centuries developing technology in secret rather than joining the galactic community as another aggressive empire. The humans had learned from their own violent history that true strength came from wisdom and restraint rather than raw military power. The captain nodded to Yunji and authorized activation of the Universal Reset Protocol. She pressed a sequence of controls that initiated systems hidden throughout the solar system and beyond, technology that represented the pinnacle of human scientific achievement developed over decades of patient research and careful preparation. What happened next would have been impossible for any member of the Imperial fleet to predict or understand. Instead of weapons or explosions, space itself began to change around every Valdorian ship as dimensional fold generators activated on a scale never before attempted by any civilization in galactic history. Each Imperial vessel found itself surrounded by a bubble of altered space-time that gently but irresistibly transported it away from Earth's solar system. The process happened instantaneously across the entire fleet, as 800,000 warships were simultaneously relocated to a carefully prepared star system on the galaxy's edge, thousands of light years from any inhabited world. Admiral Thokran watched in amazement as his flagship materialized in orbit around a yellow star that provided optimal conditions for supporting life. Planetary surveys showed worlds with abundant resources, perfect atmospheres, and everything necessary to build a thriving civilization. But detailed scans revealed no materials suitable for manufacturing weapons of mass destruction. The relocated Valdorian fleet found itself in a star system that had been specifically engineered to encourage peaceful development while making aggressive expansion impossible. The planets contained all elements needed for agriculture, construction, and technological advancement, but lacked the rare isotopes and energy-dense materials required for building warships or planet-killing weapons. Automated systems throughout. The new star system began broadcasting detailed instructions for establishing sustainable colonies that could support the millions of displaced Valdorians. The messages explained principles of cooperative governance, environmental stewardship, and peaceful conflict resolution that offered alternatives to the imperial model of conquest and domination. Back in Earth's solar system, Minho stood on his bridge looking at empty space where the largest military force in galactic history had existed moments before. The Universal Reset Protocol had functioned perfectly, removing the immediate threat while offering the displaced aliens a genuine opportunity to build a better civilization. Dr. Hyunwoo Park appeared on the communications screen from Global Defense Initiative headquarters to confirm that Phase 2 had achieved complete success. The dimensional transfer had relocated not just the Imperial fleet, but all Valdorian military installations throughout their home system, ensuring that the Empire could no longer threaten any world while giving them everything needed to develop peaceful alternatives. General Sojin Kim joined the communication to report that monitoring stations were detecting similar effects throughout the galaxy as automated systems implemented the full scope of humanity's response to galactic aggression. 17 other aggressive empires had found their military forces relocated to prepared star systems where they could learn to coexist peacefully or remain safely isolated from civilizations they might otherwise threaten. The technology that enabled such massive dimensional manipulation represented scientific breakthroughs that most species would require millennia to achieve. Humanity had compressed this development into decades of intensive research motivated by the desire to protect not just Earth, but any world threatened by conquest and exploitation. Professor Ji-hoon Bae reported that galactic communication networks were carrying news of the Imperial relocations throughout known space. Word was spreading that Earth possessed technology capable of neutralizing any aggressive force while offering relocated civilizations genuine opportunities for peaceful development. Captain Tae Young-sung confirmed that temporal monitoring systems showed the displaced empires were already beginning to explore alternatives to military expansion. Without access to weapons of mass destruction, former Imperial commanders were being forced to consider cooperation and sustainable development as methods for ensuring their civilization's survival and prosperity. Sojin addressed the assembled defense coordinators and reflected on what they had accomplished. Humanity had demonstrated that technological superiority could be used to protect and reform rather than simply to destroy. The galaxy now understood that some civilizations had evolved beyond the cycle of conquest that trapped most species in endless cycles of war and exploitation. Min-ho received final confirmation that all Valdorian forces had been successfully relocated and that Earth remained secure from any immediate threats.